humanity and all the fairness it's speeding around it.
A date that will live in infamy.
Of America is the right to protest far right.
That's one small step for man.
Obviously a major malfunction.
In 1957, Frenchman Albert Lamouris created Risk, the world's first board game of global domination. With imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, board game designers began producing their own variations on the theme of world conquest. Olaf Helmer and Lloyd Shapley created Summit in 1961. In 1981, Larry Harris Jr. introduced Axis and Allies. Robert Simpson produced Supremacy in 1984. In 1985, Fred Bates presented Ultimatum. Glenn Drover revealed his creation in 2003, Attack. In 2012, another French design team would take Lamouris's original concept and replace the risky dice-rolling game engine with a mechanism that was instead driven purely by strategic brainpower. Brian and Brent Newton called their game Balance of Power. The year is 1815. Napoleon Bonaparte, after ravaging Europe in a series of wars in which he led France to victory time and again against the combined forces of Europe, has been defeated and exiled for the second and final time. The Empire of France, which had grown to include the Confederation of the Rhine, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, the kingdoms of Italy and Naples, Spain, Austria, Prussia, and Poland has fallen. Its borders returned to those of 1791. The great powers of Europe have met in Austria at the Congress of Vienna to restore order to the continent, re-establishing national borders, reinstalling traditional heads of state, and assembling a system of alliances designed to prevent any one nation from ever again dominating Europe militarily.
Russia was represented at the Congress by Alexander I, who presented himself as the liberator of Europe for his role in the disastrous ending to Napoleon's Russian campaign. In 1812, Napoleon had marched his grand army of 680,000 soldiers into Russia, only to find the Russian army an elusive force that would not engage them on the battlefield. Instead, they continually retreated deeper into the heart of Russia while setting fire to their own cities and crops as they went, in order to prevent Napoleon from using these resources to supply his own army. With his troops starving and exhausted, Napoleon was forced to retreat at the worst possible time, just as the bitter snows of Russian winter began to fall. By the time the French army left Russian soil, it numbered only 27,000 soldiers. The devastating Russian campaign tarnished Napoleon's standing as a military genius, severely weakened the French ability to wage war, and ultimately led to the defeat of the French juggernaut. It was with some justification, then, that Alexander I held himself in high regard amongst his peers at the Congress of Vienna. However, Austria's foreign minister, Clemens von Metternich, was concerned that Russia might launch a campaign of its own to conquer Europe, and so styled himself the architect of the peace, with the goal of keeping Russia, as well as France, in check. Realizing that the French Revolution, instigated by the lower-class bourgeoisie, had acted as the catalyst for Napoleon's later conquest of Europe, the Congress adopted measures to restrict the power of the citizenry throughout all of Europe, in order to prevent the crude and uncivilized nature so brashly displayed by oafish peasantry and unsophisticated common folk from once more creating such far-reaching havoc.
Fearful of too much power in the hands of the people, the alliance supported the centralization of power in a single monarch, and opposed any form of government in which the populace could vote, reversing the progress made by the Age of Enlightenment, which championed the cause of individual liberty. The Congress instead returned to the philosophy of monarchical rule. Louis XVIII was recognized as the legitimate sovereign of France. The Bourbon rulers were restored in Spain, and the Dutch Republic reverted to its former standing as the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Congress worked to secure peace and permanent stability in Europe by forming the Quadruple Alliance. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia agreed to cooperate in the suppression of all revolutions and attempts at conquest, an alliance which France would also join in 1818. People throughout Europe, however, were resistant to the conservative ideology of the Quadruple Alliance, and in a series of uprisings, the people of various nations took up arms and challenged their governments to recognize their fundamental natural rights to life, liberty, and property by providing them with a written constitution and elected legislature.
This liberal philosophy of republican ideology clashed with the conservative powers in Europe to violent ends. When a clandestine group comprised of nobles and middle-class small landowners known as the Carbonari attempted to forcibly install a constitutional monarchy in Italy, they were defeated by the Holy Alliance of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. In December 1825, 3,000 soldiers attempted to quicken the pace of government reform in Russia. Known as the Decembrists, they were crushed by their Emperor Nicholas I. In 1848, 800 delegates convened in Frankfurt, a city of the German Confederation, to form a unified German empire and draw up a constitution governing its peoples. Frederick William IV, King of Prussia, dissolved the assembly, bringing the considerable force of the Prussian military to bear against the revolutionaries, who either abandoned their ideas of reform or fled to the United States, where freedom had already been purchased by the blood of other men.
With France no longer the dominant power in Europe, the Congress of Vienna was successful in creating a stable peace, which would last until the First World War. A balance of power. This is the setting in which the player finds himself in the game, as the head of one of the great powers at the Congress of Vienna, either Great Britain, France, Prussia, Austria, or Russia.
The Ottoman Empire is also an option. Although the weakening Ottoman Empire had nothing to offer the great powers in terms of a balanced strategy and therefore was not represented at the Congress, a 5-player game would always produce uneven results when forming diplomatic alliances, and so a 6th player was needed in order to restore equity to the full game. While the Ottomans were becoming increasingly isolated and destabilized due to rebellion, corruption, and religious strife, they are the most significant of the 3 other powers in the region at this time. Spain had not been relevant as a world power in 200 years, and Italy would not become a unified nation until 1870. The rulebook states that certain liberties were taken with the game's map in order to ensure a balanced gameplay, and the inclusion of the Ottoman Empire is an obvious example of this.
Through a system of checks and balances, players work to bring military might, economic pressure, and the force of sovereign will to bear against the other leaders of Europe in an attempt to position their empire at the pinnacle of power within the coalition. On paper, all signatories to the peace have agreed to abide by the terms of the Troppau Memorandum, in which each regime has pledged its support to aid the others in suppressing future revolutions. However, the lust for power is strong, and it has been demonstrated that power is relentless in its pursuit of corruption. As the leader of a great European power, you are as vulnerable to the persistent voice of power as every other leader. A force that urges you to capture territories and expand your empires in order to improve your position among the powers of Europe, even as you profess a commitment to equality among the aristocracies of the continent. All players have taken an oath to prevent conquest, yet all players are secretly consumed by the lust for more territory, more wealth, and more power. As the great powers jockey for position in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, will you emerge as the greatest empire in Europe, or relegated to a secondary status, with the welfare of your people dependent upon allies greater than yourselves? Play the game of political alliances, and see if you can rewrite history by successfully upsetting the carefully crafted balance of power.
There are 3 types of units in the game: the king, general, and banker, each with a unique advantage. A general, through the strength of the military, has the ability to assassinate kings. A banker has the ability to seize the assets of a general, reducing him to poverty and ruin, resulting in his loss of station and removal from the field. A king has the authority to imprison bankers in dungeons from which they will never return. These 3 units have an interdependent relationship in which each enjoys a superiority over one type while remaining susceptible to another, in a rock-paper-scissors mechanic. Each turn, a player may activate one of each type of unit, with 3 actions to choose from. Movement is performed by advancing a unit from one territory to an adjacent territory, provided a territory never contains more than 3 units. Territories may contain any combination of unit types, as well as forces from 2 or even 3 different nations, so long as the 3-unit limit is observed. Attacking can be handled in 2 different ways. A unit may attack another unit that is within the same territory. Simply remove the defeated piece from the board. It is also permitted to combine a move action with an attack action. To perform this special attack, simply move into a territory containing an enemy unit, after which you may attack and remove the opponent's piece. In this case, it is permitted to move into a territory that already contains 3 units. This is the only time the 3-unit per territory limit may be disregarded. It is a legal move because one of the units will be removed as the attacking piece moves in, so this type of attack action will still resolve with only 3 units remaining in the territory. The third possible action is duplicate. Each unit has the ability to generate additional units of their type, duplicating itself in its own territory. Generals can recruit soldiers from their current territory to train as new field commanders, resulting in an additional general. Bankers can teach the principles of economics and mathematics to students who will then enter the territory as new financial professionals. Kings may raise princes, mentor regents, or groom nobles with whom to co-reign and expand their influence, producing an additional king unit in their territory. In each case, the duplicate action simply results in an additional unit of the same type being added to the territory, keeping in mind the 3-unit per territory limit. Each great power is comprised of 9 territories. If a player controls all 9, he is said to have achieved empire. As a bonus, players who have achieved empire may activate a 4th unit of their choice, using it to either move, attack, or duplicate. In order to control a territory, a player must occupy the territory with at least 1 unit, while being the sole occupant. If another player moves a unit in, control of the territory is lost.
To start the game, players will place a king, a general, and a banker into their capital. They will then take an additional king, general, and banker, and place these pieces in any other of their own territories that they wish in whatever combination they so desire. For each territory a player controls, he receives 1 point. If a player has all 3 units present in a capital, a king, a general, and a banker, he receives an additional 3 points, for a total of 4 for that territory. These bonus points make an opposing player's capital an attractive target. Any player who achieves the required number of points instantly wins the game.
The great powers will then sue for peace. National boundaries will be set, and Europe will enjoy a cautious peace for nearly the next 100 years, until tensions within the Balkans boil over at the outset of World War I.
I very much enjoy Balance of Power. It's an abstract game, and abstracts are infamous for their pasted-on themes, but this has perhaps the greatest immersive theme of any abstract game. The game looks like Risk, but has a much classier, intelligent feel to it because everything that happens is the result of intellect. There's no lucky or unlucky dice rolling. There's no hidden information. It's just my brain against yours. And the game does play just fine with 2 players, but once you add more players, it becomes a game of juggling chainsaws. You're fighting on multiple fronts, which all have to maintain that balance of power, or you're dead. There are only 3 types of units in the game, generals, bankers, and kings. So if you lose one, say you lose all your bankers, you're done. If you lose all your bankers on just one side of the board, you're done. Because with no bankers to stop them, opposing players' generals can sweep through your ranks with impunity and wipe out every king you have, and then you'll be down to just one type of unit. So once you lose all of one unit type, the game's over for you unless you can work out some kind of alliance with another player. So it's very important to maintain a balance of your forces on all fronts. Now, I used to be a ranked Stratego player, and this game reminds me very much of tournament Stratego matches. The tournament game is very different from the casual game, and I don't mean the rules are different, I mean the way you play. The tactics are different. Every move is calculated. Nothing's left to chance. Lawyers have a saying, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Well, in Tournament Stratego, you never attack a piece you don't already know that you're going to defeat. There are no casually made moves, no giving in to sudden impulses or risky strategies that will look like genius if they work. No. There's no, well, let's see what he does if I move this piece here, or I don't know what that piece is over there, so let's attack it and find out. Now, that's not how you play Tournament Stratego. It's a completely different style of playing. And what it comes down to is wearing down your opponent into making casual game-type moves out of frustration or even boredom. You have to be like a sniper, waiting, and waiting some more, being patient, forcing the opponent to make the first wrong move. Sometimes losing the first piece creates a domino effect that you can't recover from. I've been in games where my opponent conceded after losing just the first piece. Now, you can play Balance of Power casually and someone will win, but if you go into the game intending to win, you're going to need to play on a tournament level, very patient, and keeping your units balanced on all fronts. A lot of the strategy is reminiscent of chess. Planning ahead, using decoys to sacrifice certain units in order to draw opponents into traps, and setting up defensive cover so that any unit that removes yours from the game will be destroyed itself. If you like Risk-style games like Fortress America, Batu, or Blood Feud in New York, you're not necessarily going to like this game because while it bears a passing resemblance to the Risk genre, it doesn't play the same. It doesn't have the same feel. However, if you enjoy abstract strategy games like Camelot, The Builders, and Conquest, you may like Balance of Power. Now, just because a person likes abstracts doesn't mean they're going to like this. Different abstracts have different objectives. There are all-in-a-row games like Goblet, connection games such as Cross Track, stacking games like Santorini. There are blockade, capture, and positional style games. Now, Balance of Power has captures, but the object isn't to capture an opponent's king. The objective is to reach a certain number of points. You do that by capturing territories on the board, so it's kind of positional in that sense, but you're not trying to capture all four corners of the board, or all the red squares, or even all the capital territories. You're just trying to capture enough territories to get you the required number of victory points. It doesn't matter which ones they are. So it's a unique type of abstract. It's not a positional game like Chinese checkers. It's not a counting game like Mancala. It's not a chess-style game like Ploy. It's a blend of capturing pieces as you position yours well around the board, respawning units, and allying with partners while working to ensure that you reach the required number of victory points ahead of your opponents. So there is no standard category of abstracts that this belongs to. I can say with a reasonable amount of certainty that if you like chess, you might like Courtyard, or if you like Othello, you might like Touché. But Balance of Power is so different from other abstracts that it probably won't have a ready-made base of fans. I'd say the closest group may be those who enjoy the 1986 game Conquest, put out by Quest Games. Also, most abstracts play in a short amount of time, and at an hour and a half to 2 hours, this is quite lengthy, which again isn't what most abstract fans are used to, with few exceptions like chess. However, I think that those who will like it will be either those who enjoy abstracts or who, like myself, like games of world domination and can appreciate the unique mechanic that Balance of Power brings to the table. The two things that may turn off Ameritrash gamers, in addition to being a diceless wargame, are the unit styles and the 3-unit per territory limit. These units aren't cool tanks or even soldiers with swords. You get a round disc, a crown, and a Napoleonic style hat. When a game's in full swing and you look over the board, you don't get a cool sense of military battle. You basically see a bunch of abstracted pieces on a map. I mean, let's face it, the 1959 version of Risk doesn't sell as well today because people would rather play with cool components instead of colored cubes. And the pieces in Balance of Power are really just one step up from that. Also, you can't load up a territory with 47 generals or 32 kings in order to create a really intimidating force. You can only have 3 units per territory. So I think those two factors, in addition to the abstract gameplay, will really combine to disappoint most Risk-style fans. Now, that's not to say there isn't a good game here. This is a great game. But like so many other games, you really need to play this with the right group. People who will appreciate it for what it is, a lengthy abstract with a world domination theme, and one which you really can't play casually. You have to think things through, play methodically, carefully, and patiently. The game is very well made, from the beautiful board with colors that contrast well, to the wooden pieces. They even supply you with extras. The insert is perfect. Everything comes game ready. No need to put the bits in extra bags or organizer boxes. The rulebook is very clear, well written, and the optional scoring track is very sturdy. Now, the only negatives are the reference card. They're very well made, and they have all the information you need to play the game, but the text is printed so small that it's hard to read. Now, with that said, I do enjoy the game and would recommend it to those who like Risk-style games, but are put off by the randomness of the dice, as well as casual chess players looking for something with a little more theme.